Awesome. Hi, hello everyone. I am the co-founder and CEO at Zenskar. I have with me Saurabh, who's my co-founder and leads product and tech at Zenskar. And our guest today in our session is Mr. Mountu Jinwala, who's a senior engineering manager at Confluent. He previously used to work at Netflix and eBay, and he has significant experience, building billing systems at software companies. Today's session is mostly going to be focused around, talking about the key considerations to keep in mind when building in-house billing systems, key challenges faced, what kind of stakeholders are involved with an in-house billing system, how billing itself is evolving with the overall macro in SaaS evolving with software pricing, moving more towards consumption-based pricing, and also how to think about the build versus buy decision. When does it make sense to build? When does it make sense to buy? Those are some of the key topics that we will cover. And yeah, we'll keep it interactive. So again, want to thank you for joining us. Maybe we can begin with a brief introduction about yourself. If you could take a couple of minutes to briefly introduce yourself, that'd be super helpful for our guests.
So Apurva and Saurabh, thanks for inviting me. Very happy to be here. Just a small introduction. Currently, as Apurva said, I'm leading a billing and marketplace engineering team at Confluent. Uh, just to give an analogy, it's like when you use AWS software, you're charged based on what you use. Similarly, at Confluent, we have similar pricing structure for cloud, and I lead the cloud billing space. Prior to that, I worked at Netflix and I focused on security. Started with the security as an infrastructure engineer, and then I led the whole financial forecasting engine for content spending. So, which is very critical for Wall Street reporting. And prior to that, I got my first taste of billing in eBay shopping.com, where I was leading a project where we replaced the whole credit card system gateway with the PayPal and understood how the whole billing, what are the billing concepts and why it is so critical, why it is the heart of the company. That's where I got my first taste around like 10, 15 years back. So that's a small introduction.
Awesome, awesome. Uh, cool. So maybe do you want to, you of course have significant experience building billing systems in house. A lot of our guests who are going to be watching this session, they are grappling with how to build in-house billing systems. So should they build? Should they buy? Do you want to quickly touch upon some of the key considerations that people should keep in mind when building an in-house system?
Sure. I think this is a very common question, common strategic question for many companies. They have to solve it, right? Whether you are a small startup or you're a mid-sized company or you're a big company. So uh, the key considerations is like, first of all, it is important to understand the requirements of what the billing system at your company requires, right? Every company has a different product and their pricing models and their growth strategies are different. So understanding those future requirements, the pricing model, how product is sold, is the most important thing, and that is what will drive first thing whether build versus buy.
So, what are the kinds of cases that you have seen? Like when you say that the business model will define what a billing system should look like. So, can you talk about like what some of these varieties could
Yeah,
be and why that influences
yeah.
things?
I'll share an example. Let's say you have a SaaS product where you are just doing at very high level, application level, where you're only dealing with APIs, right? So your pricing model is number of APIs you use and then rate limiting based on that, right? You're not going to do another. There are no other completions like number of dimensions across which you will build is going to be very less. But if you have a SaaS infrastructure company where you are more lower level, like let's say you have a Confluent or AWS, right, where there is a region is one of the dimension, then which cloud provider is, then what kind of networking. So Now your number of dimensions across which you will do the billing is growing exponentially, right? And that increases the complexity. Now, and how you are going to build, how it is going to evolve in future, based on the cloud strategy, your models will keep changing, right? Sometimes what also happens is because you have more dimension, it gives you more flexibility to sell the same product to different customers in different part of the world, right? So you might want to have a separate billing model for different, like for Asia APAC, you might sell it differently. You might give more discount because you're getting more discounts from the cloud provider or some of those things, right? And what also happens is as product evolves, sometimes some features you deprioritize because you see like it's not being used, so you don't want to charge for it, and you bring new features. So you want to build on the on the same framework. So that's why build versus buy decision becomes that, like, what is your company's and product and engineering strategy for next 3 to 5 years? If it is moving, if the goal is that, hey, we are going to build a lot of products and a lot of different dimensions are going to come, then will, if you're building in house, is your team able to going to keep a pace with it, right? So that's where my next point was going to come. It also depends on which phase of the company you are, right? Let's say, for example, in my personal opinion, based on the experiences, if you are a startup with 20, 30 people or 50 people or 100 people, right? What is the main goal right now, right? The main goal is to focus on product, go to the market, right? Now, if you have such complexities and you're going to building in house, first of all, you need to bring the expertise. You need to bring the experts, engineers, build a team, and building the whole infrastructure for all the systems components that are required, right? That itself could take easily 8 months to 1 year, even if you do very speedily, right? So that is 1 year, and that many amount resources cost is very high. Now if you bring a vendor who is already supporting like offshore system, or let's say Zenskar or some other company, right? If they are already supporting these things, then it becomes sort of self-serve because your product manager can directly go, you are just pumping the data, whatever requires setting up, and you are get to go. Now that 1 year, if you spend those energy, you are losing some opportunity. There is opportunity cost that is very critical, right? If if in one if you are bringing time to market from 1 year to 1 month, then your team is focusing on the actual product. At the same time, you are charging the customer. It gives you an ability to experiment, because when you build a platform new, very rarely someone gets a pricing right at the first time. You have to evolve pricing also, right? So those
Yeah.
things, and when you have to evolve your in-house platform, it becomes difficult. It is not that easy. uh, 3 years back, there were not many services and products like this, like Zen's. Now we have, there is a lot. So if you're a startup or even in the mid-sized company, depending on your cost and how big the team, you don't want to have a billing team which is like 60 or 100 people engineer. Compared to that, can you get this the same, like half of the cost, can you get it using vendor, right? But for example, if you are a company like AWS or Azure, where you have like humongous, your portfolio of product is huge and the billing is huge and customer, for companies like that, there is a tax liabilities and all those kinds of things also. Like, I'm not going into that, but billing and tax, multi-country, global multi-currency, all those things come into picture. Building that in-house is very complex, right? So
Yeah.
for AWS, Azure, their volume of customers, their product portfolio, their dimensions are like way high. For those kind of companies, they have to keep evaluating. But for
Yeah.
mid-size and startup, if you have like 3 product lines and you have only 10 metrics, do you need 10 engineers for that? Like 10 engineers will cost easily a lot of money, right? And also those time, can you use those engineers to focus on product and drive the growth? So
Yeah.
that's another thing which I feel is really important, right? What is your key focus area for next 2, 3, 4 years? And there is a hybrid approach also there, where you can build something in house and you can buy externally. For example, do you want to spend time in payment integration? Probably not. Do you want to spend time in sending customer reminder emails, hey, you have not done payment, or FP&A or Salesforce integrations and external systems, right? Because on billing includes pricing, compute engine for billing, and downstream integrations with CRM, sales, and everything. Do you want to do that? If you think pricing is very monopolized or very particular to your thing, you can still do some things in-house hybrid where part of the system is in-house, but you can integrate via API to the vendor system, because that's going to be there. So you can do that also. What I have also seen is companies start with a vendor, and as they grow, and they evaluate this every 3 years, basically 2 to 3 years, right? And then they see where it is cost, right? If they had to do this in-house and it is going to cost X million dollars, and if they are taking offshore, if they are working with the vendor, when is that breaking even? What revenue they will break even point, and it makes sense to do in-house.
Mm-hmm.
One other consideration that is super critical is one advantage, of course, you is like if you do in-house, you have a lot more control and you have a lot more flexibility, right? You can customize, you can move fast. When you are working with external off-shelf systems or vendor, you have to align your roadmap with their roadmap. They have to be agreed. So that partnership is also very critical. how
Mm-hmm.
how good that partnership is, right? Say I need something, uh, there were some policy changes in cloud provider, or I am changing product strategy. I need to change the billing strategy. Will
Mm-hmm.
the platform that I'm using, which is external, allow me to do that quickly change that? Usually, most if the platforms are flexible, they will help. It would be easy, but there might be one or two features, and how soon the uh, system that I'm using. Doing in-house, it takes time, because you have existing customers, you have to change it. You might have some of the things, you might have made the trade-offs, so it might take longer time. But with vendors, that will be there. So partnership is also important. So how fast they can do. There is another advantage in early, like at least early and mid-sized companies, if they go with vendors, is a lot of time what happens is this offshore these systems are working with multiple customers which are similar to you, because that's why you chose that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have doing billing, or you have 5 features requirement, but
Mm-hmm.
then other customers who is using this offshore system have other 5 or 10 different
Mm-hmm.
requirements. Though as a customer you are not using it, but tomorrow if you want to use it, it's readily available. If you are trying to do in build in house, you have to build it, you have to get the requirement and all those kind of things. So that is also the same. So these are the 3 things, and the fourth thing is, like, I think I covered, there is a total cost of ownership is the final thing, right? At the
Mm-hmm.
higher level, when you are doing a uh, final cost analysis at the fiscal year planning, what you look for is what is the cost, how
Yeah.
many engineers, how many infrastructure, what is my infrastructure cost, how many engineers I need to build, maintain the system
Mm-hmm.
or operations, versus if I go offshore, right? That's the thing. And the last thing, which is like security and compliance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for a company which are public, they are very careful before selecting vendors. Security and compliance. Usually, every company has security team, so you can quickly integrate with the internal security platform. But now, external company has to follow that, and the compliance is the big thing, right? Once the company becomes compliance, you have to build compliance things. So SOC 2 compliance and some of those are there, but then there's some additional requirement. Again, the compliance is a very tricky thing. It all depends on what is a company product, how the metering is done, how billing is done, those kind of things. But these are the things which are critical and decision criterias where whether build versus buy come into question.
Got it. So you mentioned in one place that like when you pick a vendor, sometimes you have to align with align your roadmap with your vendor's roadmap. So can you give some examples of where you have seen this in the past, where like off-the-shelf features was not available, and you had to sort of build that into the vendor's roadmap?
Yeah. So what I have seen that happens is, let's say, around, most of the SaaS companies, when you are doing product led growth, which is a trend now going on, right? There is always a campaigns around discounts and some of those things, right? So you typically discounting module is a completely different, right? But some vendors will have only free trial, initial free trial. Now you some companies will have only some vendors will have only free trial for $X100, right? But there could be a customer where they don't want to do on X dollars, they want to do on free usage. Like if it's a storage based company, they will say, hey, I am going to give 1 GB of free usage. Now if that is not available, then it
Yeah.
becomes a challenge, right? That's a very simple example. Other example is with respect to payment, right? Say you are already in US,
Mhm.
Americas. Now, as a company, you want to grow your business in Asia, so you
Mhm.
want to give a different kind of discount and packaging to them, right? How would you do that? So that's a different campaign, and these
Yeah.
things directly integrate with your live site because it's a self-serve and product-led growth. So
Yeah.
that's where I think product-led growth is one area where they innovate fast because they try to experiment, they try to monetize, and that's
Mm.
where they work very closely with billing systems. And if your
Mm.
billing system is not flexible and adopting, and if a partner is not going to do, then you cannot unlock that growth. You have an
Mm.
idea, but you cannot unlock, and then you have to build some middleware. Kind
Makes sense. Can you maybe you obviously spoken about why it might make sense to build in go with a vendor and not build in house. But is there a version of the world where building in house makes sense and it doesn't make sense to go with a vendor? Why would somebody choose to do that?
Yeah. So, couple of things, right? If you know that your product is complex, right, and it has humongous dimensions,
Hmm.
and you have a variety of different customers, so
Hmm.
then in those cases you want to think about it, because if you have an in-house building system, you have an in-house team, they really closely understand the
Hmm.
customer needs, right, and they can quickly pivot it, right?
Hmm.
So that's one area. Other thing is uh, uh, purely the cost, right? As I said, right, if assume if AWS kind of or Azure kind of thing, if they decide to do with vendor, usually like vendors charge, there is no flat fee for vendors, right? They charge based on the revenue invoice calculated. Now, if someone is going to take even 1% of that, why would I give pie as a revenue, my pie of the revenue, right? If
Hmm.
that 1% cost is going to be more than building an engineering team and maintaining them, then that becomes a thing. And the third thing, which I feel is again purely related to the product. Sometimes some products are so complex, and the cost margins and some of the things are so niche that understanding and retrofitting that in vendor is more time consuming, because then what end up is you have to build a lot of abstractions and layers around that to make
Hmm.
it fit, right? So if like you will try to fit your billing into the vendor just for the sake of using, and then you spend every time you have to make a change, you will spend time in building, stitching that or updating it. So you don't want to be in that situation, because that is going to even slow you down a lot. So
Yeah.
that is what you need to do. So that's why it is really important when you pick a vendor, you need to understand what kind of customers they have, what kind of features they have built, and think about the 3 years requirement, right? Every company has mostly 3 year strategy, where the
Yeah.
company is going, if they switch around, how soon this vendor is going to support. If that's not going to be, then building in-house is the right decision. Because with in-house, what you can do, you have a team of 5 engineers, you need to do it, you can bring 5 engineers or 5 contractors and get it done and get it shipped, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes if time is sensitive, you really don't need to build the perfect product,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need to make it happen and let it go. So that's
Yeah.
why. But then the considerations also are, how will you maintain it. Building
Yeah.
is a continuous system, it is not like you build once and you stop, you have to keep evolving over the period of time. So those things come into play.
Got it. Makes sense. Mondo, could you also briefly touch upon the kind of stakeholders that interact with the billing system, and what all does a good billing system need to cater to when it comes to stakeholder management?
Sure. I think first and most important stakeholder is the customer,
Yeah,
right? Right. Your custom, how your customer is going to use the billing information, how they use the product, and do you have a billing information for your customers which will clearly help the customer to figure out that, hey, this is the value that I'm getting from it, right?
yeah,
So clarity, transparency, right? In today's world, in today's macroeconomic world, right, everyone is looking at their cost, right? Where I am using more, where I'm using less, what can I do to reduce the cost, right? If I am using, all that depends on how much, when I retrieve the billing data, I should get all the data points. I should be able to slice and dice, right? And what are the tricks that I can do? So that is important. And this aspect is usually not considered very important aspect by many companies, but it is really critical because what happens is this billing information is also used for chargeback.
hmm,
So big customers who are using the product, and there are like multiple orgs within the company, and they are using the product. Now, one example I'll give, like for example, I don't know if you folks read an article where Coinbase or some of the company used the Datadog and they had a huge bill, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if in those scenarios, if you are part of Coinbase team and then you want to figure out which team ballooned up the cost, right?
yeah,
Then what they will need is all the information, cluster, API, and everything, and then they will try to figure out which team is doing, and they also allocate the chargeback, right? So bigger companies will say, hey, there is a cost for each org. They retrieve the billing data and associate the chargeback, and they build the chargeback model also. But
hmm,
they also look at it and they can say, hey, your usage is there, but I'm not getting a lot of value. That's why leadership will try to push and optimize, right? So that's the transparency and your customer. Other aspect for the customer is payment, right?
hmm,
What is the flexibility in paying?
hmm,
So in software SaaS, commit models are very frequent, right? Where you do 1 year commit, 2 year commit, and you do prepay commit, right? Where you do commit and you prepay upfront, and then it works. But in current world, everyone wants to not prepay. They want to commit, but they don't want to prepay. So
hmm,
they do want to have a flexibility. Like, hey, instead of paying 500K in 1 month or in this, can I pay 500K over 12 months? How can I divide? How can I do those flexibilities? If you are catering to international customers, they may want a currency also in their currency because they
yeah,
are going to get charged for FX rate kind of thing. And I'll just take an example. Every country has their rules. Like, for example, India came out in India. There is a RBI rule where if you're using credit card, then they have to acknowledge there was a recent change. So that also impacts. So now, if you have a vendor who has taken care of all these things, you don't have to worry about it. But you're
yeah,
building in house, then you have to worry and you have to fix those kind of things. So that's so customer is the first. Second, then I usually divide external customer and internal customer. So from external point of view, your customer, product customers are the one. Then from the internal customer, the biggest team is the finance team and the product and engineering team. So product and engineering focuses on building the product. They build a feature. When they want to monetize it, they work with the billing team. Hey, this is how we are thinking to monetize. Billing team and pricing. Say, we can support this, we cannot support this. Whether it's external or internal, whether you're working vendor or not, but this team is going to tell you. And then they will help you analyze whether they can give input, whether customer is going to find value or not, right?
hmm,
So the if product and engineering team comes and they come up with some complex things which it's even hard for you to understand, then billing team will say, hey, look, these are the kind of queries we are getting.
hmm,
I don't think this is going to help. Like I have seen examples where I have helped someone and they were sharing it. This is the pricing model, and it's like it's too complex to understand. How is your customer going to? If I cannot understand, if you cannot explain, how is that customer? So you want to simplify into some virtual thing, right? finance team, right? Finance team, whatever billing invoices are generated, finance team is it's an input for a finance team. They have to do revenue recognition. They have to do forecasting. They have to do quarterly forecasting. They have to do yearly forecasting. If the company is public, it even becomes super important because then you are doing a Wall Street reporting, right? So
Yeah.
revenue recognition, revenue reconciliation. If revenue is coming from multiple sources, they have to recon, and that has to happen very quickly. So the billing system has to be super strong, super fast, and time sensitive. Like usually what happens is, based on my experience, at the end of the month, if the companies are public, they have a timelines. By this day you need to have a finance data, this way finalized the data, and by this time the report should be there, and by this time CFO should be seeing the results, right? And that time is usually in the span of 3 days to week. So if you as a billing system owner cannot provide the data, everything is blocked,
Yeah.
and you have to have the confidence and accuracy. So they are the thing, and the other aspect of the other customers are sales and customer success. So when sales are, so there is a land and expand model mostly in the SaaS, where land is where you get a new customer. So sales would like to see a billing data and analytics around similar customers and everything, right? But when
Yeah.
they are expanding or when the renewal comes, they really want to be notified at least 3 months or 6 months in advance how the customer is using. Are they underusing it? Are they overusing it? So they can get the strategy. So that billing data comes into the picture there, right?
Yeah.
They also use this information for upselling. So if you have a cohort of customer and some customer are using this, like say uh, S3 blob storage is there, and then there is a activity log or something. Some customers are using activity log information. Then someone can, when S3 pricing is being negotiated, you can upsell the activity log and build the package, right?
Yeah.
Uh, with whole SaaS, the thing is every customer has a different need. They see value differently. So you have to package it differently. And that's why your pricing becomes very critical.
Yeah.
So these are the thing. And the last is like compliance. If a company is public, your internal auditors, they are a best friend for the billing system. They will ask for you, prove me that your billing is accurate, right? They
Yeah.
will pick a customer and say, prove me that your meter, if it's a usage-based billing, this is correct. This is how you charge. This is what the customers. They will look for audit report. They will want, hey, how are you ensuring that no one went and manipulated the
Mhm.
data? So how data is secure, stored, so those kind of things. And then there are set of these processes that are set up which has to go. So I
Amazing.
think these
So
are the key customers.
Got it. And so you mentioned that like in your experience, you've seen like product teams are sort of talking about pricing and they're trying to price what they're building. Have you seen it to be product teams mostly, or have you also seen business teams sort of participate in this discussion?
So it is a combined effort. Let me put it this way, right? So I'll walk you through my, based on my experience, I'll walk you through the process. And this is what I have seen mostly is like, I'm building a new feature. Product team, engineering is building a new product. So product managers say this is the thing, and then they, usually what happens is product manager don't focus on pricing and monetization part. They focus on the product feature. But when they
Mhm.
land on product, they'll say this is how we can price. Then they will work with billing team whether first it is feasible or not, whether your
Mhm.
system can support or not. If that is there, then pricing strategy is reviewed with multiple people. Who is going to sell this product? Who is going to sell this feature? Sales, marketing, how it is going to market. Uh, Sometimes the preview is also done. This is discussed with customers also. Like this is the new feature that you ask, and this is how we're like, are you willing to pay? Those kind of things happens. Then so PM marketing is comes into picture, sales comes into the picture, finance also comes into the picture sometimes. Uh, why does finance come into picture? Cost. If you are building a feature which is going to cost you $1, but if
Mhm.
you're selling it for 50 cents, you are giving away 50, you are losing 50 cents. You can't keep doing that, right? So cost teams comes into picture. That's where finance comes into picture. Sales teams, there is another important thing. When you launch that feature, from the billing perspective also, it is also important, because typically at the end of the year, you don't want to do much disruptions, because sales cycle, sales strategies and everything planning happens at the beginning of the year. So at the end of the year, you want minimum disruptions, and most of the renewals also happen at the end of the year, because most of the companies will finalize their budget at the end of the year, and that's where they decide. So that's where negotiations or renewal or amendments, those kind of things. So end of the year, you typically don't try to change this. So a lot of these teams, in fact, you're depending on the product and how big size of the company, your like key stakeholder is all exec team. Like
Yeah.
exec team will also review, and everyone might say yes, but exec team might say no,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they are talking to the customer, right? They really know. So it's overall thing. But
Makes
what billing team says is that, hey, we have seen this in past. We had to change this pricing model. Even
Yeah.
before you go to the higher level and spend too much time, reconsider it,
Yeah.
and whether our system will be able to support or not. If we are, it also gives a billing system uphand whether they need to build new feature or they need to work with partner. For example, if you are using vendor, then vendor doesn't support, then we have to tell vendor, hey, we are going to launch. We need to streamline, and then the whole planning begins.
Makes sense.
Got it. You also touched on like how accounting sort of gets all this information from the billing system, and then they have to, like there's like a very tight timeline for all the reporting. So where do you think the sort of line is drawn? The separation of responsibility between the billing system and the accounting system. So like the revenue recognition, do you think that should be part of billing? Do you think that should be owned by accounting in like a different system? Like, what's your thought process
Yeah.
there?
So typically, what I have seen is accounting is completely separate team, forecasting is a separate team, and then revenue recognition is done by accounting. But uh, it also depends on the billing and product, right? If it's a simple subscription, you can do with Salesforce. But like let's say if you're doing a usage based billing, right? There is a lot of dimensions and everything. So there is an engine which is going to compute and finalize the invoice. Now you don't invoice immediately, right? Your invoice is on the monthly schedule or yearly based on whatever it is. When invoice is finalized, that's where the billing compute and billing systems end, and that
Yeah.
data goes into revenue recognition systems. Now there are systems like NetSuite, and there are systems like even Salesforce has some systems now where they do billing and tight integration with NetSuite. But what typically I have seen is uh, for at least for in-house, where there is a separate engineering org where they do the billing compute, they compute the data and they give the feed. So there's a daily data feed which is not finalized, which is subject to change, right? That goes. So forecasting does not block, and revenue team and sales are right. But then at the end, if it's a month end or whatever is your revenue recognition cycles, you give finalized invoice. This is the finalized thing, and that goes into the accounting system, and they take care of it. And they do. If they have any questions, or they have their own guardrails, if they see anomalies, then they reach back to the engineering teams or billing system. But that's where it ends. The only time it happens is what happens is, say forecasting or accounting want to do revenue recognition and they need extra guardrails, so they need more data points, and those data points cannot be related to anything to billing, but it's just a metadata. So that has to be incorporated in the billing system so it can
Mhm.
flow, and it improves the efficiency. I'll give an example where we have certain what we have done in past is like we had certain metadata where it is not related at all to billing. We are not billing, we are not charging, but just because of missing that metadata, the revenue accounting team and finance forecasting team was spending weeks, like 1 week to final revenue. But just putting one data point in right place, it reduced from 1 week to 1 day.
Wow.
I see. What
And
was this data point?
similarly for forecasting at in when I was doing forecasting engine, There's a month and they have to compare the forecast whether they are off or not, and they have to do variance and analysis, right? So it used to be like 20 people, like 10 people taking a 1 day or so. It was a 20-day person work. We automated that whole thing because we billing system has already data. We automated that thing, and they were able to close everything in 1 day. So all the
Interesting.
variance of my board presentation. So that's the thing. This variance is a very good example because a lot of billing systems they don't have. But like for example, what we build is uh, post release. When you release a new version of your software, you want to
Mhm.
make sure that nothing is broken. How are you going to make sure if it's a backward compatible? So what you really do is you have a past data.
Mhm.
You should be able to rerun the billing with a new version of the software on the past data and old version, and you do comparison. You should not get any variance. The moment you get a variance, something is wrong. So it's a true black box testing. Sometimes
Yeah.
this has also helped to detect something which product team has done wrong, because if they have changed some billing dimensions and which billing team doesn't, because it's a decouple, then things will break. So those things we, but this is one of the things which, like, personally feel is a must have. How are you going to make sure that when you release a new version of the software, you have not broken anything because of backward compatibility and temporalness and everything? Because a lot of time, what happens is the feature is only available for up to X date, and then you change how it behaves, and
Mhm.
that's where the things break. Because if you release a new version, everything, if you have to rerun the billing, let's say sometimes sales made a mistake and you have to adjust the metadata and then you rerun the billing. That's a very common case which I have seen. You
Mhm.
have to account for this thing, that until this date this feature was working like this, and now you have to calculate like this. So that's
Yeah.
where also.
Got it.
Got it. So I'll come to the editing part shortly. Like, what I'm curious, like, what was this one thing that you had to add which reduced the time from like 10 days to 1 day?
Yeah, it was the contract ID kind of thing, Salesforce contract ID. So
I see. Got
usually
it.
different contract IDs are different system, right? Now you have to join,
Hmm.
and when
Got it.
revenue accounting is doing, they have to manually do it. Then there is a customer kind of thing. So it's not exactly that, but something similar I cannot share that way.
Got
But
it.
but the variance thing, that variance engine that I gave an example in my previous company, that is like true. Like, we were running forecasting at the end of the month. We were running forecasting this month. Between last month and this month, what was the variance? Why the forecasting changed? So we build a smart engine, and it will give a reason that for this many, these are the top reasons why the forecasting changed. You were forecasting 12 million spend, and now it is 15 million. So why
Mhm.
there's 3 million? Is that? Because ultimately finance team has to go and explain CFO why this variance is coming.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Very
Cool. I
interesting.
think we're running out of time on too. So, just one last thing that, wanted to cover.
Mhm.
If you could briefly talk about challenges in building a scalable billing platform, I think that is something that will be super helpful. And then we can probably wrap up.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for building a scalable billing platform is flexibility. Most
Mm.
of the platforms which I have seen is, if it's an in-house, and it's very tied to the when the billing system started, and it has, you build layer upon layer, and it becomes very difficult to modify. If you want to completely change the business, or you have a new business product coming, it becomes very difficult to modify, right? So flexibility is one of the things. Second thing is, uh, as your business grows, you need a lot of billing tools built for managing billing operations, right?
Mm.
And if you are doing in-house, you are just doing for billing. You are not building good set of APIs, right? So
Yeah.
API first has to be there, because if you have a good set of APIs, and your DevOps can use those APIs and build the tools and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
what happens is, there is no good set of APIs.
Mm-hmm.
Billing teams end up doing billing operations manually, so that increases overhead. So engineers are spending more on operations than actual building the feature. So that's the challenge. And very related is, most of the billing platform that I have seen are not self-serve,
Mm-hmm.
right? That self-serve aspect is very critical, especially in the SaaS. Self-serve for the customers. You don't want customer to reach your sales level. Hey, I want to see my report how my invoices are done. Right? They should be able to go click and get, and maybe they get a chart also that hey, this is how you are spending. This is where you can optimize. That's where AI and automation comes.
Mhm.
Uh, so self-serve part is also important for internal stakeholders, which we discussed about, right?
Mhm.
Sales, finance, accounting. A very simple example is sales team made a mistake and we want to do refund of let's say $X100 or $X1,000. If you don't have a good refund flow in your billing system and it's not self-serve, what they have to do, they have to create a Jira ticket, then it comes to engineering having to do a bunch of changes and get that. Instead of that, if you build an internal self-serve, let's say you don't want to expose to external, but you want to do internal, then that revenue accounting or salesperson can say, hey, this is the customer ID, this is the refund, this is the reason, click, accounting or whatever approvals required, approve it and done, and it goes in the billing system and the billing system will do, right? This is the
Mhm.
most common thing. A lot of time what happens is coupon system is more common, right? You don't actually do refund, but you provide a coupon, right? But sometimes customers don't want to, they want to
Yeah.
have, but coupon application, creating coupon and applying for customer is another self-serve thing, right?
Mhm.
Which not like some like I have seen few systems where coupon or referral code is completely missing. They
Mhm.
don't even have that generating coupon, referral code, and access control around that. So
Mhm.
that's and the two other things which I comes in terms of billing system is testing and validation.
Mhm.
Lot of uh, teams don't have billing teams don't have that good testing and validation. Considering accuracy is the most important thing for the billing, you cannot guarantee accuracy with manual testing. So you have to automate hackoff. So one principle that which I generally like to follow is if you're building any making changes, if you don't have an automated test, you cannot release it.
Yeah.
And black box testing, right? So automated test is there, but black box testing, the variance testing that I suggest. How do you I like I don't want to have a sleepless night because I am having a release, right?
Yeah.
I should feel confident. I should be able to sleep. If things will break, I will have a way to recover or some way. So testing is one way that infrastructure and security and compliance. Security and compliance usually what happens is security always takes the back seat. But in my perspective, based on the size of the company and how important security should be the first thing. When you are building the feature, security has to come. Because there are times where customers, GDPR and some of privacy things come into picture, but there are times where customers don't want their billing information to be exposed by any to any level or even within the company who can access. So there could
Mhm.
be customers they don't want engineers to see their billing information, only finance teams want to see. You don't want
Yeah.
engineers expose this. That access control comes into picture, and
Yeah.
compliance is for your own sake. If you have a good audit trails, uh, audit trails is another thing a lot of software misses this. Good
Mhm.
accessible audit trail is important because that's what helps you. Like if customer comes and say, hey, I was expecting this charges but I am seeing this, can you show me? If you have an audit trail, someone in your company made a change and they upgraded to the different package and your cost has increased, this is the
Yeah.
timeline, this is how it works, and this is the explanation. If
Yeah.
that those things are automated, you build tools around that, then you improve efficiency. Now engineer is not going to spend 3 hours, they can just click and see the audit trail. I call it memento, where you can go back and see how things work.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. No, Montu, this was incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your candid insights.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, thanks a lot.
sure, your wealth of experience, our viewers will really, really appreciate. And yeah, look forward to having you back again soon on one of our next sessions where we can chat about more such topics. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. It is a very interesting topic. It's a vast space, right? And uh, I think we can keep talking about it whole day. There are so many
Yeah,
areas, so
yeah,
many things with
totally.
new products coming. The challenges are different.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Great.
can all geek over billing like all day long.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.